President Trump and Joe Biden have a busy weekend on the campaign trail as we approach the final few days before the election ends. The president will hold multiple rallies this weekend, but first he cast his early ballot in West Palm Beach, Florida, Saturday morning. Mr. Trump used the occasion to continue his attacks on mail-in voting.
I voted for a guy named Trump. It was a very secure vote, much more secure than when you send in a ballot, I can tell you that. Everything was perfect, very strict, right by the rules. When you send in your ballot, it could never be like that. It could never be secure like that.
Before Democratic nominee Joe Biden hit the campaign trail, he spoke in his home state of Delaware, where he again attacked the president and his response to the pandemic.
This is a success. What's a failure look like? We're more than 8 months into this crisis, and the president still doesn't have a plan. He's given up. He's quit on you. He's quit on your family. He's quit on America.
For more on all of this, I want to bring in Nikole, Killion, and Sean Sullivan. Nikole is a CBS News correspondent, and Sean is a CBSN political contributor and national politics reporter for the Washington Post. Great to have both of you with us. Nikole, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. The president, we saw him there casting his vote in Florida. We know that this state is crucial for his reelection campaign, so how's he doing?
Well, look, as you mentioned, it is a critical state, especially for the president. If he doesn't win Florida, certainly it makes his path to 270 much tougher. He and his campaign have predicted victory there, but certainly the Democrats are eyeing that as a place of opportunity. They certainly would like to put Florida in their column, and so that's why there is no accident that you see a former President Barack Obama who will be in Florida later today. You know, we do know the race is very tight in Florida, as it has traditionally been, and that, you know, races in the state could come down to very slim margins. So that's why you see a lot of emphasis on the state. Certainly the president held a rally there just last night. And so, again, it will be very pivotal in the days to come. And I don't think this is the last that you will see of either of the candidates in that state before Election Day.
I think that's a pretty safe bet there, Nikole. All right, Sean, Joe Biden is campaigning in Pennsylvania on Saturday. A key issue in that state is fracking and the oil industry. The Democratic nominee stirred up a bit of controversy during the debate when he said he would end the oil industry, it sounded like. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Would you close down the oil industry?
By the way, I would transition from the oil industry, yes.
Oh,
I will
that's
transition.
A big statement.
It is a big statement.
That's a
because
big statement.
I would stop.
Why would you do that?
Because the oil industry pollutes significantly.
Oh, I see.
And here's the deal. But
That's
you
a
can't
big
do
statement.
that. Well, if you let me finish the statement, because it has to be replaced by renewable energy over time.
So Biden clarified later that he said he wants to end federal subsidies, not the oil industry itself. Sean, how does all of these comments play in a state that he's trying so desperately to win, like Pennsylvania?
Well, Lana, President Trump and his allies believe this is something of a political gift that they've been given from Joe Biden. This is something they feel can help them in Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, but also in a state like Texas, where seeing some tightening polls. Republicans are still favored there, but Democrats have long wanted to turn Texas blue. And of course, there is a huge oil industry there. You know, this is a debate that the Republicans have been trying to elevate for a while. And the challenge for Biden and the Democrats has been that while Biden's positions have been pretty clear on fracking, on the oil industry, he hasn't always articulated them so clearly. He's had to clarify himself at several points throughout this campaign. And we saw that again on Thursday night. As soon as this debate ended, Biden and his campaign were scrambling a little bit to try to clarify and say, look, number one, nothing's changed about his plan. Number two, he was talking about subsidies. But this is a big deal to a lot of voters in Pennsylvania and in Texas when you look at fracking and oil. And what it comes down to is jobs more than a policy debate, really. There's a lot of people who work in the hydraulic fracturing industry, who work in the oil industry, or who work in industries adjacent to those industries. You know, there are a lot of facilities, plants that are built by construction workers, and they belong to labor unions. And these labor unions are sort of figuring out, you know, where they stand on these issues. So it's a very, very significant thing potentially in Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, and also in Texas. And it's something that the Democrats have sort of struggled with at times to find that balance between, trying to have a position that says, look, we're going to address climate change, but also one that they hope does not alienate workers in these industries. And I think we're seeing some of the challenges in the final stage of that race kind of play out in real time.
Sean, I remember during the debate actually taking a beat because it was surprising to hear him say that, even with his clarifications. Do you think that those comments might have cost him Pennsylvania?
We'll see, right? But it's a narrow lead. And when you look at the issue of fracking, when you look at the issue of energy, you want to look at Western Pennsylvania. You want to look at the areas around Pittsburgh. These are the areas where you have voters who are especially tuned into these issues. One other challenge for Biden is that, a lot of labor unions have his back when it comes to fracking. They're saying, look, he is not somebody who is an enemy of fracking. He is not somebody who's an enemy of the oil industry or of fossil fuels. But when you talk to members, when you talk to the union members, they have a different view. And a lot of them hear over and over again President Trump saying Joe Biden is an enemy of fossil fuels. Joe Biden wants to ban fracking. And even though the president is distorting Joe Biden's view, he's not representing it factually, these arguments work and they persuade a lot of these voters. And in Pennsylvania in particular, a lot of Biden allies are worried down the stretch that these arguments could persuade some of these voters that are going to be really, really important there.
All right, Nikole, we have seen former President Barack Obama hitting the campaign trail for Biden. He's doing it again, this time in Florida. We heard him really going after President Trump in a sort of scathing rebuke. Do you expect that we'll see this again? And can you help us put this in context? Usually when we hear a former president campaigning, it's more of an elder statesman, somebody who's more of a hype man for their candidate, rather than actually an attack dog. How unusual is this?
Well, I wouldn't say it's unusual. I mean, it's unusual from the standpoint of that unspoken rule of former presidents not wanting to criticize the current office holder and really trying to step back. But, I think for some time now, former President Barack Obama has crossed that line, if you will, whether you look at the speech he gave during the Democratic National Convention, whether you look at comments that he has made to allies, and even if you look at some of the comments that former First Lady Michelle Obama has made. She, too, also delivered a pretty scathing rebuke of the president not too long ago in a 24-minute web video. So that being said, certainly it's very clear that the former president has an opinion about this president and an opinion about what has happened under his watch and what has happened to his own legacy and some of, for instance, the Affordable Care Act, which, of course, certainly the former president would be very concerned about its fate going forward. So that's just one of many issues. And I think what you saw from the former president in Philadelphia the other night is that he just had a lot on his chest and he put it out there on the table. Now, whether he will continue to be that scathing going forward, I think remains to be seen with the appearance today. But certainly, I think at this stage in the game, what he really wants to do, and certainly what the Biden campaign and Democrats see his role as, is really kind of motivating people to get out there and vote. And you have heard this from both Obamas. Really, they want the folks that voted for him back in 2008, 2012, who didn't vote in 2016 to come out again. They want to get younger voters. They want to get more voters of color. And so you also heard the former president make those types of appeals in Philadelphia, and more than likely will do so again today in Miami.
Yeah, it's also, to be fair, the case that President Trump is also not holding back any punches when it comes to President Obama either. One last question for you, Nikole. The Trump campaign said that they had their best digital fundraising day following the debate, bringing in $26 million. But we do know from federal filings that they entered October with significantly less cash than the Biden campaign. So what does this all mean for Trump's campaign this close to Election Day?
Well, prior to announcing those numbers, we know the Trump campaign had approximately, I believe, $63 million cash on hand, which is about half of what the Biden campaign does. But look, I think, the campaign has continued to argue that they were outspent the last time. So I don't know that they see that particularly as a hindrance. If they are behind in the amount of cash that they have, certainly getting this extra infusion following the debate helps. And look, we'll have to see how they apply that. I do know the campaign was asked just this morning if they plan to put out more messaging, for instance, on this issue of oil in light of the comments that the former vice president made during the debate, how they plan to capitalize on that, because certainly that is something that they have been seizing on. They wouldn't specifically say if they would be putting out, for instance, new ads related to this. They just continue to argue that they have been putting out messaging since that moment at the debate. But that being said, again, I think they see their best asset right now as the president. That's why you see him out today with 3 rallies. He's going to continue at that pace or something similar in the days to come. And certainly even before Election Day, we expect that he will even build on that, holding upwards of 3, 4, 5, 6, events a day as we get closer to Election Day. So I think at this stage, that's where they think they can be the most effective in trying to reach voters in the final stretch.
All right, Sean, last question to you. More than 53 million people had already voted as of Saturday morning, just as the unofficial vote early day got started. That's in large part because of the coronavirus pandemic, of course. So remind our viewers what we might see on election night and when we might actually know who America has selected as the next president.
Well, the big thing to keep in mind is the fact that when people tune in on election night, they turn on their TVs, if they're expecting to see and hear a final result that night on who the next president is, they might be surprised to learn that we might not have that result that night. And the reason for that is we're seeing these record numbers, as you mentioned, Lana, of mail-in ballots. A lot of people casting their ballots through the mail. They don't want to show up in person. They want to stay safe. And so what it comes down to is what the margins are going to be in these states, and where those stand on election day. When you look across the board, there are all sorts of legal challenges and legal battles that have been underway, pitting Democrats and Republicans against each other about mail-in ballots. And because these states oversee their own elections, the laws are not uniform across the board in terms of what a ballot, what you have to have when you turn in your ballot in terms of signatures, in terms of the deadline. And so the question is, what are these margins going to be? If it's a clear margin one way or the other, if we see Joe Biden or President Trump with a very, very clear lead, then we might have a winner on election night. If not, it could be days or potentially more. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that we don't have to see every single, final total counted before some of these networks will be expected to make calls on who has won these states. So, there's a little bit of uncertainty right now. But again, the big difference here is you turn on your TV on election night, you might not know who the winner is by the time you go to bed.
All right. Sean Sullivan, Nikole Killion, thank you both.